Week 8 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers I would start this week. The first kicker, Brandon Aubrey of the Dallas Cowboys. We know Aubrey pretty much every week. He's going to have a big game for the most part. 60-plus yards isn't a problem for him as well. And he's been an automatic kicker ever since he's been in the NFL. And the last few weeks for Aubrey, he had a couple down games, though. Week 5 at the Jets, 5. Week 6 at Carolina, 7. And Week 7 versus the Commanders, a big ball game, 16 fantasy points, including hitting a 61-yarder in that game. So Week 8, a good matchup at the Denver Broncos. Obviously, easier to kick there with the altitude. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. And Brandon Aubrey, it wouldn't be surprising to me if they trot him out there for a 65-plus yarder, because I think this Cowboy offense still struggle a little bit in this game, even though they're one of the best offenses in all pro football this season. And Brandon Aubrey, like I said, one of the best kickers, if not the best kicker in the league. And Dallas won't have a problem trotting them out there. Next kicker staying in the same game, Will Lutz of the Denver Broncos. So Lutz, it's been an up-and-down season for the most part for him. But this week, a good matchup versus the Cowboys. Give up the 8th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. And this Dallas defense, more weeks than not, we know they can't stop anyone. In the last few weeks for Lutz, Week 5 at Philly, 9. Week 6 at the Giants, 8. And Week 7, the game-winning field goal after scoring 33 points in the fourth quarter to come back and beat the Giants, 5 fantasy points. So Lutz, we know 50-plus yards isn't a problem for him. Dallas, like I said, can't stop anyone. And Denver, with the altitude, always a good place to kick. And possibly this could be a high-scoring game as well between these two teams. Well, obviously, Dallas, one of the better offenses in the league. And Denver last week showed they could come back and put points on the board versus a bad Dallas defense this week. I think they could do the same. And Lutz will get opportunities. Next start, Eddie Piñeiro of the San Francisco 49ers. So Piñeiro, he's been one of the best kickers in the league since he signed with this 49er team in Week 2, and 3 weeks in a row now with double-digit fantasy points for Piñeiro. Week 5 at the Rams, 16. Week 6, Tampa Bay, 17. And Week 7 versus the Falcons, 11. So Week 8, not a great matchup for Houston, where their defense for the most part this season has been a bend but don't break unit, is this Houston Texan defense. And believe it or not, they give up the least amount of fantasy points to kickers on the season. But Piñeiro, it doesn't matter where it's been this season. He's gone out there, put points on the board. They're very confident in him as well to kick 50, 55-plus yards. And also the other good thing, obviously, a good matchup indoors where you don't have to deal with the elements. So with all those factors, once again, I like Piñeiro as a start, and it wouldn't surprise me if he has another double-digit fantasy day. Next kicker, Evan McPherson of the Cincinnati Bengals. He really hasn't been on the fantasy radar much as McPherson. So he's a one-week guy that I think will be a top 12 option. It's a good matchup versus the New York Jets that give up the most fantasy points to kickers on the season. The last couple of weeks of defense has been the bend but don't break type of defense. And like I said, McPherson, this season, numbers are definitely down, but last week a big game it was for him versus Steelers with 16 fantasy points. Week 5 versus Detroit, 8. Week 6, Green Bay, 5. And Week 7 versus Pittsburgh, 16 fantasy points. So this week, like I said, is a one-week starting option versus the Jets that give up the most points to kickers. And McPherson, we know, going back a few years ago, he's one of the better long-range kickers in the league, but obviously he's taken a step back a little bit last season and definitely this year. But this week versus the Jets, he's a kicker I would start. And the final kicker, Chris Boswell of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Chris Boswell, it's been another solid year for him. One of the most accurate kickers of all time from 50-plus yards is Chris Boswell. And he's just a kicker that they're going to trot him out there easily 50, 55 yards. And he's going to put it through the uprights more times than not. So the last few games for Boswell, Week 4 versus Minnesota, 6 fantasy points. Week 6 versus Cleveland, 15. And Week 7 at Cincinnati, 8 fantasy points. So this week, a matchup versus a bend but don't break type of defense in the Green Bay Packers, where the Packers, their defense, like I said, they don't give up a lot of touchdowns. They hold you to field goals. I think Chris Boswell in the Sunday night game this week goes out there once again and has a good performance. That's a few kickers I would start for Week 8 of the fantasy football season.